There is a certain kind of silence that settles over an arena when giants enter the ring, an anticipatory hush that says more than any roar of the crowd ever could. It's the silence of awe, of disbelief, of the shared human instinct that recognizes when something extraordinary is about to unfold. Because when men of impossible proportions step forward, when mountains of muscle and raw aggression collide under the lights, everyone watching knows they're witnessing a different kind of combat altogether. Not just skill against skill, but force against force, rage against resilience, and sheer physical magnitude pushed to its breaking point. Few fighters encapsulate this better than Bob Sapp, a name that today is often tossed around with mockery, a so-called fraud of the fight world. But that reputation overshadows something people either forgot or never saw with their own eyes. The era when Sapp was not a meme or a punching bag, but an apex predator. A walking catastrophe. A beast in the most literal sense of the word. Back then, stepping into the ring with him felt less like preparing for a martial arts bout and more like getting ready to confront an avalanche. When the bell rang for one of his most unforgettable clashes, Sapp wasted absolutely no time revealing the savagery that earned him his infamous nickname. He surged forward like a runaway tank, aiming straight for the head of his opponent as if the man standing before him were nothing more than a high-calorie appetizer he planned to devour. The crowd barely had time to gasp before the smaller fighter was folded into the canvas, introduced to the floor in a way only gravity and terror can combine to create. Yet even as Sapp dominated, the match took a bizarre turn. The battered fighter, making no attempt to adhere to anything resembling fair play, tried to counter by leaning into his background, invoking sumo skills, grabbing, pulling, attempting to twist the fight into something closer to a wrestling match than a striking contest. But Sapp was not interested in this pantomime of resistance. He snapped forward, and in an instant that left the audience howling, detonated the other man's jaw with a punch that seemed to echo from one end of the arena to the other. It was less a strike and more a declaration of dominance, one that ended the contest the moment it landed. But Sapp was far from the only giant whose clashes turned the ring into a stage for some of the most brutal spectacles in modern combat sports. Across the world, in the rugged, snow-dusted expanses of Russia, something far stranger, and far more chaotic, was unfolding. A group of men, dissatisfied with the rules and traditions of established martial arts, decided to create something rawer, harder, and infinitely more unhinged. The result was bare-knuckle bouts fought between men whose size alone made them look like escaped characters from mythological war epics. One such fight brought together two titans whose combined weight could have snapped the floorboards beneath them. The moment the opening bell chimed, the larger of the two lunged forward like a heavyweight Khabib Nurmagomedov who had traded technique for brute combustion. He hammered into his opponent with the relentless, almost rhythmic violence of a lumberjack attacking a tree trunk. Every strike was a swing meant to break, to topple, to erase any trace of resistance. His rival crashed to the ground again and again, each fall punctuated by the crowd's wild reaction. Yet even under such punishment, the downed fighter refused to stay defeated. Something in him, call it stubbornness, call it pride, call it the unyielding spirit of a man who refuses to accept the script handed to him, kept dragging him back to his feet. And in the next round, fueled by adrenaline and a burst of final strength, he surged back to life. His fists found their mark. His confidence flickered back into existence. For a moment, it looked as though the tide might turn completely, as though the battered giant might actually reclaim control of a fight that had seemed lost from the start. But the reprieve didn't last. The hulking opponent, enraged by the sudden defiance, unleashed another crushing assault. And with one massive blow after another, he sent the revived fighter tumbling back onto the canvas, flattening him under the full weight of his fury. When the final bell sounded, the bearded colossus was declared the victor. But in truth, everyone watching knew something deeper. The real winners were the fans who witnessed a war that could never be replicated. The spectacle of giants clashing didn't end there. In 2011, another unforgettable confrontation unfolded between Alexander Lungu and Neil Cook, two fighters whose physiques suggested they might spend more time drinking beer than training, yet who carried the kind of raw physical power that made the ring seem almost too small for them. As soon as the fight began, Lungu charged forward with the enthusiasm of a man who had been waiting all day for an excuse to swing his fists. He barreled into Cook, immediately throwing heavy shots that landed with the dull thud of sledgehammers meeting wet earth. Cook tried to counter not with strikes at first, but with arrogance. He strutted. He taunted. He attempted to provoke Lungu as if words alone could unbalance a man built like a granite statue. But Lungu had no interest in theatrics. He answered Cook's mockery with a few doses of what could only be described as old-school Eastern European discipline, punches that came from deep in the shoulders and carried the weight of decades of hard living. In the end, Cook dropped to his knees, overwhelmed and thoroughly humbled. Lungu didn't even need